friends. Welcome to Scott Fox After 9. That, the sounds of Pat James and The Whole Truth. Hey Now, you can find that song wherever you get music. I recommend Spotify, Apple Music, or wherever. Pat's great, and I want to thank him for that incredible song that I use in every episode now of Scott Fox After 9. Today's episode is going to be a little similar to yesterday's, if I'm being honest. In this episode of the pod, you're going to hear a lot from Prime Minister Carney, and I want to drill down and talk about what the Prime Minister is talking about in his announcement that he made yesterday out on the East Coast. He's got a big slush fund that he's creating, big, billions of dollars that he says is to bail out. He didn't say bail out. That's my word. He said to help out the companies that are facing adversity because of tariffs and because of the state of our economy. I'm going to propose something different. In this episode, I'm going to give what I think is a good common sense solution for how we can support companies without just doing handouts. Corporate welfare is another term for it. Corporate welfare is when the government decides the winners and losers. That's when they will say, you know what, that company over there, we like them and we don't want to see them go under, or they could use a little bonus, so we're going to give them money. But then another company that they don't like as much or that doesn't support them might not get anything. And I don't like it when the government does it because I think that there's a lot of red flags in just handing out taxpayer money to private businesses to quote unquote keep them thriving and surviving. You're going to hear from the Prime Minister in his own words in this episode, and then we're going to discuss my common sense solution on how we can change the way we do things here in Canada and make it better and more responsible and more accountable for us, the taxpayers. Because, of course, the government has no money. All of it comes from taxpayers. Before I get into it, though, I want to read you a DM that came in after yesterday's podcast. If you didn't hear yesterday, at the end of it, I talked a little bit about vaccines, and I talked a little bit about autism. I talked about Robert F. Kennedy. RFK is in the process of preparing to release a massive study that he had commissioned to find out exactly why we're getting sicker and why so many kids are being born onto the autism spectrum. I think that this is something that we should all care about because, well, something's going on. The numbers seem to be spiking and nobody's really sure why. But one thing they know for sure is that it's not because of vaccines. Is that true? Because I think at the heart of it, people just want to be told the truth. So we're going to talk about that based on this DM that I just got. And this is how I'm going to start off today. I'll leave this person anonymous, although I did really enjoy the conversation with her yesterday in my DMs. She says, "Hey, Scott, just finished listening to today's podcast. As someone whose son is on the spectrum and nonverbal, it piqued my interest. I have a hard time trusting RFK, but that's fine. I'm willing to listen. At the end of the day, if we can figure out what causes autism, maybe we can help prevent it. But I will say, after 2 miscarriages, I did everything by the book when I was pregnant. I didn't drink coffee, I didn't eat cold cuts, and I definitely did not take any meds, including Tylenol. So his theory doesn't really make sense to me personally, but I'm curious to hear what he has to say. But like you, I'd like it to be backed up by a reputable scientist." While we're on the autism note, it's time for Doug effing Ford. I miss you playing F you, Doug, on your podcast. He needs to move his ass in getting kids funding. That would be fantastic. My son just turned 12 and he is still waiting. So are 70,000 other kids for that matter. Maybe he should spend less time obsessing over Donald Trump and alcohol and more time on the future of this province, the kids. If he came right out and fought for the 70,000 kids still waiting for services like he did for the 200 employees that are going to lose their job at the Crown Royal bottling plant, I would feel much better off and families would be better off as well. I want to thank this person who sent in that message because, you know, from time to time I get caught up in the issue of the day. And while I try and not do that, I try and keep my eye on the bigger picture. Sometimes certain things do slip through the cracks. Just this week, I admitted I had fallen behind on the Epstein stuff. I apologize. That was last week. I fell behind on the Epstein stuff, and I don't want to let that story just go. I know that's what Donald Trump wants, but I'm not going to do it. I'm going to stay on the Epstein thing until we get answers. I sometimes also forget about the amount of kids that are waiting for funding for the various autism programs, the ABA, the speech therapies, and things like that they need. And that's something that has been ongoing in this province for a very long time. And for all I know, it could be an issue in other provinces as well. So I want to talk about that. This person says they're willing to listen. And that was what I asked you to do yesterday at the end of the pod. RFK is going to come out with some information that links autism to a number of different things, nearest I can tell. The report's not out. I'm not going to put words in his mouth, but I am very curious to hear what they find, because until now, we've had a whole bunch of people tell us, shut up, don't worry about it. It's definitely not vaccines, but we don't know what the cause is. And it seems like nobody really cares either. You know, we've got billions of dollars being spent on healthcare in this country, and we've got billions of dollars being spent on research. And frankly, I don't understand what's more important than something as simple as sick children. I don't understand why this isn't a priority. So I'm glad that RFK is doing this research, but I'm also aware he is a threat to the establishment. If, hypothetically, there is a link between autism and vaccines, the people who make vaccines have a vested interest in that not getting out because they want to sell vaccines. Understood. If RFK draws a link here, they're going to do absolutely everything they can to discredit him. And for all I know, again, the report's not out, maybe he should be discredited. I don't know. But I want people to keep an open mind to the possibility, because as far as I'm concerned, there's nothing wrong with looking into it. There's nothing wrong with lifting up the hood and looking around to figure out what exactly is going on here and why does the problem seem to be getting worse, not better. I want to play for you just a quick clip here from RFK talking about some of the preliminary research that apparently we're going to get when he releases his monumental paper on the health of America.
In 1999, CDC was also alarmed by the same thing that you described with the parents. So they decided to do an internal study of their own database, which is called the Vaccine Safety Data Link. It's the medical records, including the vaccination records, of 10 million kids from the 10 biggest HMOs. So it's all the cumulative medical records from all those HMOs, and they're all housed in one place. And they said, let's see if these mercury vaccines are causing autism. So they looked at one vaccine. They can look at every vaccine record, and then they can look at your medical claims to see if you had seizure disorders or allergies, or if you have an autism diagnosis. They can do a cluster analysis, and they can look for associations. So they looked at the hepatitis B vaccine, which is loaded with mercury, during the first 30 days of life. They looked at kids who got it during the first 30 days. They compared them to kids who did not get it during the first 30 days, who got it later or didn't get it at all. And here's what they found. The relative risk of smoking a pack of cigarettes a day for 20 years and lung cancer is 10. This was 11.35.
Is that because of thimerosal?
What was causing from thimerosal. This is what the story that got me involved, because they pushed the panic button and they had a secret meeting. They didn't want to do it on the CDC campus because they thought it would be susceptible to freedom of information requests.
I'm going to leave RFK there, and I'm going to fully acknowledge that he is very difficult to understand at times because of his condition. However, what he said basically was the CDC's research found that a vaccine's autism risk was higher than smoking linked to lung cancer. They say the risk from smoking a pack a day for 20 years leading to lung cancer is a 10. The risk from vaccines leading to autism is an 11.5. There's something here. There's something worth looking at. And you know what? If this investigation goes nowhere, okay, it went nowhere. But again, there's no harm in researching this and looking. My question is, even if they're right, will you believe him? If RFK comes out and says, hey, you know what? We figured it out. The leading cause of autism in kids is, I don't know, chewing gum under the age of 5. Will you believe him? Of course, it'll be something a lot more well researched. That's just an anecdote off the top of my head, but you know what I mean. Will you believe him? Because right now there's a major campaign on to discredit him, and I can only think that that's coming from the medical establishment and those who have a vested interest in protecting what they have now, and what they have is guaranteed sales. I don't know. I don't know if people are going to trust him. You know, we could have the actual answer and people don't believe it's the answer. And I'd love to not be in that scenario because I think that this needs to be dealt with. Now, when it comes to the issue of funding, this person who wrote to me is absolutely right. She's got a 12-year-old who is still waiting for appropriate funding for the therapies and treatments that he needs. There's 70,000 other kids that are still waiting. Here's what we have to do. And as far as I'm concerned, there's no two ways about it. There needs to be two tiers of funding for autism. First, we have to recognize the fact that this is a medical condition. And in Canada, you are entitled to medical care. So whatever care is required here should be provided, no questions asked, and there should not be any discrepancy about whether or not the funding is available. We have it. Just like we do for all other forms of health care, this is something that deserves to be funded without question. This is a medical thing, and we have healthcare coverage in this country. Full stop. So we shouldn't be screwing around with this. And if we're not appropriately funding all the therapies that are needed, the ABAs and the speech therapies and things like that, then that's a problem and that needs to be fixed. However, there's another stream of funding that needs to kick in immediately. Immediately. Schools need more EAs, educational assistants. And I don't know who signs up for that job, but it doesn't pay that great. And frankly, it's not very glamorous from what I can tell. Seems like they do a lot of things that most normal folks don't do in the course of their workday. And they're actually helping people who need it. The problem is we need more of them. In some cases, schools are completely overwhelmed by the amount of students that need extra support. This shouldn't be a question either. This should just be an automatic. We need to train, hire, and pay well more EAs in schools. And there's some of those that think EAs should get paid less specifically because they're not teachers, because they didn't go to teachers college. Well, maybe that means teachers need to get paid more. Either way, I think EAs need to get paid more as well, and we need a lot more of them. If you are someone who really likes to help people who need help, then this could be a great career path for you. And the funding for it should just be an automatic. School boards should not have to go to the ministry or wonder if they're going to have the money to fund this. It should just be an automatic. We've got a crisis in our schools in that they're being overwhelmed, and I'm not using hyperbole here. They are being overwhelmed by the amount of kids that need extra supports. If they need extra supports, we have an obligation to provide those supports. We need two tiers of funding, some for the therapies outside of the schools and a lot more funding for those who deal with this within the schools. All the resources they need, they should have. There should be no questions asked about this. And frankly, I don't understand what the problem is. We as a province had no problem forking over billions of dollars. When COVID came around, that was no questions asked. This was a medical thing and we needed to fund it and throw all the money in the world at it to deal with it. Okay, well, COVID's done, and we proved that even if we don't have the money, we can come up with money, and that's exactly what needs to happen here with COVID. I challenge Premier Ford to not let another school year go by without a major announcement and instant implementation that we have the money and we are going to properly fund autism therapies, supports in schools, and more for the families who need it. There just should be no more question about this. If 70,000 kids are still waiting for treatment, what are we doing here? That's my rant on that. Hey, listen, when the RFK stuff comes out, and I don't exactly know when that's going to be, but I was led to believe it would be in September. Give him the benefit of the doubt. No matter what unsavory things you've read about him online or heard from a friend of a friend, this is the guy who's currently in charge of Health and Human Services in America. He came in here with what I believe were the best of intentions to try and get to the bottom of what's going on and why America, and us probably by extension, are getting sicker. Is it something in our food? Is it medications we're taking? What is it that's causing this? Once we know what's causing it, not only can we potentially prevent it in the future, maybe we can even reverse it. in some cases, depending on what the ailment is and the severity of it. We just want answers. We just want to know what's going on. And again, I'm challenging the premier. Please don't leave these families waiting any longer. You've got to do something about this, and the funding should not be a question. We proved during COVID we can come up with money when we need it, and we need it. Now I want to move on to another topic. The Prime Minister was out yesterday, and he was making an announcement on the East Coast. I believe he was in Newfoundland and Labrador, and he's talking a lot about green initiatives for a second day in a row. When we get to that part, I'm going to have a few things to say about it. I think you should hear it. But he's also talking about handing out billions of dollars to try and support companies to bring them through this existential crisis that we're dealing with here in our issues with America. Now, I'm going to say, before I even get to the Prime Minister, this is not a crisis. If it was, Parliament would have been sitting and we would have treated it like a crisis. It was okay during the election campaign to say it was a crisis because he needed to get elected. He's already elected. I don't know why he keeps beating this dead horse. People are done with the Donald Trump stuff, but he's going to keep it going as long as he can, and he's going to spend a lot of money as that fire officially goes out. Here is yesterday, Prime Minister Mark Carney speaking on the East Coast.
But that future, that economic future for our country is caught up in a storm. Caught up in a storm as the United States fundamentally reshapes all of its trading relationships. And to be clear, Canada currently has the best deal of any of the United States trading partners in the world. 85% of our trade with the United States has no tariffs. It's tariff-free. And we have the lowest average tariff rate of any country. But we've learned a lesson over the course of the last several months, is that our relationship with the U.S. is changing. And we can't rely on our most important trading relationship as we once did. You know, we can't control what other nations do, but we can control our destiny. So we're focusing on what we can control and building our economic strength right here at home.
Okay, that's the big intro. He has again reminded everybody we have the best trade deal going with America, best deal in the world. That was because of the USMCA. That was because of our deal, our trilateral deal with America and Mexico. That deal prevented about 85% of our trade from being tariffed. Okay, so we're really only talking about 15% of the economy here. That probably explains why most people haven't really even felt the effects of tariffs. And by and large, I don't think the vast majority will either, to be honest with you. I don't. But the government is really keeping up this charade that this is a massive crisis that requires us to spend unprecedented amounts of money to try and deal with it. Here is more of Prime Minister Mark Carney.
Just last Friday in Mississauga, I announced a series of new and comprehensive measures to protect, build, and transform our strategic industries so they can prosper in this new global economy. These measures are, they're wide-ranging and they're flexible, they're focused on the future. And the first thing we focused on was measures so that Canadian workers can develop the skills for those new high-paying careers that those nation-building projects the Premier and I referenced will create. And we shouldn't underestimate, I'll stop here, shouldn't underestimate just how many jobs will be created, for example, in Churchill, as it's built out, on top of the over $225 billion of revenues that come to this province as it operates over decades. So we start with workers, we start with retraining, we start with building. And then we go to those industries and we give them the opportunity to pivot to new products and markets with a $5 billion new strategic response fund. The third thing is we've introduced a comprehensive Buy Canadian policy. So we're modernizing all of Canada's public procurement to prioritize public and Canadian suppliers. Because it's time that we become our own best customer, buying Canadian to build Canadian. So your government will buy in this province and across this country. Fourth, you know, there's some businesses that are very acutely impacted by these U.S. tariffs, and they need immediate liquidity relief. They need immediate funds in order to adjust. And that's the case for the steel and aluminum industries. These are world-class industries. But they're enduring punishing U.S. tariffs. And these impacts are being felt far and wide, including out here on the East Coast. So our liquidity facilities give businesses the support and the time that they need to position themselves for the future. And lastly, this will be my principal focus today, we're strengthening supports for our medium and small businesses. In March, we announced the Regional Tariff Response Initiative, $450 million across the country to support SMEs directly or indirectly impacted by those U.S. tariffs. And the idea is so these companies can step up and diversify their products, diversify their markets, adopt new technologies, become more competitive. And last week, I announced that we'd increase the funding for this from $450 million to $1 billion. Not just that, we'd extend the repayment periods for up to 9 years and provide new non-repayable contributions of up to $1 million across all sectors, so from seafood through to IT. And today I'm proud to announce that $80 million of that funding will be dedicated to businesses right here in Atlantic Canada.
I'm losing track of how many billions of dollars this guy's committing out to different things for different funds that all sound the same and all appear to do the same thing. He is just throwing so much money out the door. So much money. Did you hear in number 2 how he just casually glanced over the $5 billion? Then at the end, he increased from, $500 million to $1 billion. And it's not even repayable. A portion of it. What you do have to pay back, you don't have to pay back for 9 years. Let me just say this, because Mark Carney, I realize, has still got the ear of a lot of folks out there. If you're a conservative, yeah, I am too, but I want you to understand something. The prime minister is still in somewhat of a honeymoon period. There's a lot of people who don't want to have another election. And there's a lot of people who are willing to give Mark Carney a chance. And I'll tell you, they're getting a little iffy on Mark Carney. You know, there's been a lot of talk and not a lot of action. And our trade with America is no better than it was. And now they're saying we're probably going to have to live with tariffs forever. And no, he can't get a deal done with Donald Trump. People are starting to get a little wishy-washy on him, but they're not ready to give up on him yet. Conservatives, when you do things like minimize his accomplishment on the weekend, I'll say it. Mark Carney did a 26-kilometer off-road race. It was a track race or something like that in Haliburton, Ontario. It was his wife's birthday, and she wanted to do this run, and Mark joined her. He ran 26 kilometers along a trail in 3 hours and 45 minutes. He finished 58th out of 120 runners. He's 60 years old. That's an accomplishment. I couldn't do that now at my age. That's an accomplishment. He deserves credit for that. I think that was a nice moment. And I go online and all I see is conservatives trashing him and belittling that. You shouldn't be running. You should be running the country. I mean, you can walk and chew gum at the same time. Let's not forget that. I think that was good. I don't see why anybody is crapping on the prime minister for that. So I'm not going to crap on the prime minister now because you know what? I feel like he's endured quite a bit. We can criticize his policy. Absolutely. A personal accomplishment, something he did on his own time on a Sunday afternoon, stop that. People are still not at the point with Mark Carney that they were at with Justin Trudeau. Now, the prime minister needs to understand that time is coming quick, and if he does not do something to right this ship, he's going to end up even less popular than Trudeau, and it's going to happen a hell of a lot quicker than it happened with Trudeau. However, I'm not worried about Mark Carney here. That announcement, it's scary how much money he is going to push out the door. Scary. What scares me the most, though, is the people who's going to be spending it. The prime minister, in a lot of cases, is probably not going to be the guy to decide which seafood factory and which steel and aluminum plant is going to get the handouts. It's going to be cabinet ministers, and they're going to be lobbied by local members of parliament. Do we really want to have another $5 billion fund plus another $1 billion fund out there apparently doing the same thing that's administered by Chrystia Freeland, Stephen Guilbeault, Melanie Jolie, Bill Blair, Anita Anand, and all these other people that were right there cheering on Justin Trudeau for 10 years. I don't trust them. I don't trust them. I wouldn't trust them to manage a lemonade stand, let alone a multi-billion-dollar fund that is very, very very discriminate in how they hand out funds. We know there's going to be companies that need it that won't get it. There's going to be companies that don't need it that will get it. When it comes to who gets their loans forgiven and who gets the favorable repayment terms, we know that companies they like, companies that support them are going to get it, and companies that don't will not. How do we know that? Because we have a memory and history. That's how they operate. I don't want any of the people I just mentioned administering this fund. I don't trust it to not get squandered. And that's why I think we need to fundamentally change how we do corporate welfare in this country. You heard the Prime Minister at the beginning of this episode. 85% of our trade is tariff-free. We're only talking about 15% of the businesses or of the trade that's impacted here. And some of that 15% doesn't even do a lot of trade. I want to know that if taxpayer money is being given out, it's being given out responsibly, and that there's value to the Canadian taxpayers. And at the absolute minimum, I want to guarantee that if we give companies even $1, part of the deal is they have to stay in Canada. And I don't think that these people are smart enough to think of stuff like that. I just don't. I don't think they're smart people, and I think they're very, very selfish, and they're opportunistic. They're looking for chances to make themselves wealthy or their friends wealthy. And this is an easy way to do it. When you've got $5 plus $1 billion just to float around on, nobody's really watching it. Sure, stroke a check to this company, that company. You know, I think back to the Arrive scam thing. We saw how completely out of control that got. Nobody was paying attention to the fact that this IT company was just two people who got extremely wealthy, went way over budget, and they didn't do any work anyway. They just contracted it out to another company. That's the kind of nonsense that we cannot allow to happen here. Not one more dollar from the taxpayers can get wasted on helping out their corporate buddies. No more of it. Let's hear a little bit more from the Prime Minister, and then I'm going to get a little further in depth on what I'm proposing here.
Now, the $80 million under that regional tariff response initiative that goes to Atlantic Canada will help, as I said, SMEs to expand into new markets. For example, developing innovative packaging and product formats. Think in food processing, in fishery, vacuum-sealed lobster tails or flash-frozen crab clusters, tailored for high-demand European markets. But it'll also help strengthen supply chains as businesses upgrade their cold storage and live holding systems, so products can stay longer, fresher for longer, and make it easier to reach more export markets overseas. And our manufacturing and resource industries will also benefit.
No, and no. If you set up a business, you're taking a risk. That's always been the case. If you want to open a business, you've got to invest your money, and you've got to do what business owners do every day, adjust to a changing market. That's your job as a business owner. And if you can't hack it, you go out of business. I don't want to see any businesses go under, but the business has got to be viable. I don't understand why, because the Americans are tariffing seafood, we have to create some whole new packaging system for them so that it's easier for them to ship it to Europe and then buy them a bunch more freezers so they can keep it for longer. No, that's a cost of doing business. That's what that is. And you know what? If there truly is a business model for selling over in Europe, then they'll figure it out or raise the price or do whatever they have to do. This is not something the taxpayers should be paying for. Not in any way. Mark Carney is being very irresponsible with our money right now, friends. Very irresponsible. If we're going to hand out even a penny of taxpayer dollars, here's how this needs to work. Number one, There needs to be clear criteria on how a business can apply for that money. They need to be able to identify themselves as a business that's struggling. They need to say it's directly linked to the tariffs from America. They need to show us exactly what they want to do with that money and create a schedule that's reasonable and attainable for them to pay back the money. Taxpayers are not here to bail out private businesses. No way. Not happening. This is a loan that they need to pay back. Again, we don't want any businesses to go under, but frankly, I would rather give zero money and watch a business go under than watch us give $5 million to some seafood factory that's only ever going to generate $3 million in tax revenue. Why would we give them 5 to possibly, maybe in the future, make 3? It doesn't make any sense. Now, again, I don't want the government picking winners and losers. So that's why these businesses need to come with a clear business plan, and they need to be treated like they're dealing with a bank. If you go into a bank and you want a loan for your business, sure, you're going to have to pay interest on that loan. You're going to have to work out terms that work for your business, but also that work for the bank. The taxpayer should be no different. Come in with a credible business plan, backed up, tell us what the benefit is to having your company here in Canada, and make sure that the money we're contributing is equal and makes sense. That shouldn't be hard. And another thing, handing out all this money, it's a hell of a lot of money to be handing over. Billions and billions of dollars the government is just going to give to businesses. And as you heard the Prime Minister say, some of them it's going to be loans that don't have to be repaid for 10 years. Some of them the loans will be forgiven, kind of like we did during COVID. Do we get a guarantee that that business is going to stay open, stay employing people at the current employment levels or higher, and they'll stay in Canada? Because I don't know that we have those assurances. I don't want to invest a penny into any business that we're not, as taxpayers, going to get our value back, and that's just going to up and leave anyway. We've seen too much of that, especially in the auto sector. We promise all this stuff. These companies take our money, and then they end up folding. We're not going to build that battery factory in Quebec after all. Thanks for the money, Canada. Piss off. No more of that. No more. We need assurances. Let's run this like a bank would run this. And I'm not saying charge heavy interest rates, but again, there has to be value for the taxpayers. We can't just hand out money to businesses for them to do whatever they want with. And when they want money from us, we'd like to see a business plan on what you're going to do with that money. Is this money really just going to get filtered down to the executives? Are we going to give them all this money and then they end up laying a whole bunch of staff off? Are we going to give them all this money and then we find out they're dipping into the foreign workers category? What's the plan here? There needs to be accountability, and this should all be very, very transparent. It should be as plain as day and easy to find who these companies are, what they plan to use the money for, what their long-term plan is, and how much of it they have repaid and how much they still owe to the taxpayers. That's the least we as taxpayers can expect from a program like this. We need transparency because, again, I don't trust Chrystia Freeland, Anita Anand, Stephen Guilbeault, Melanie Joly, and all these other Trudeau ministers to hand out billions of dollars. I just don't. And here's one more thing. This is a big one as far as I'm concerned. Before we start handing out money to companies to do whatever they want with, without any real assurances or guarantees that this is going to be good value for the taxpayers, or that this business is going to continue in operation, or that they even need it. You know, I mean, there's lots of companies that own smaller companies, and even though the big company is extremely profitable, like a Brookfield, the smaller company on paper is losing money, probably as a write-off for the bigger company. I don't want that smaller company to get taxpayer revenue. Are we going to only give this money to medium or to businesses that have a certain number of employees that are earning a living and paying income tax based on that living? I mean, there's so many different questions here. So here's what I want to propose. Instead of just giving money to these companies, let's buy their product, whatever the product is. We want to help out the seafood industry, apparently, here, Mark says. Want to help out the seafood manufacturers. Well, instead of just giving them $10 million to do whatever it is they have to do, let's buy the seafood. Buy it. And we'll have freezers that we can store it in. We'll have a strategic reserve of salmon, a strategic reserve of halibut and oysters. There's nothing wrong with doing that. You know what? If you want to take it even further, help out the restaurants at the same time. Buy the seafood from the seafood manufacturers, distribute it to restaurants who apply for a little bit of help, and everybody wins. And we even kept it in Canada. No more just handing over billions of dollars to any company and trusting that they're good for it, trusting that it's going to be good value for the taxpayers. I don't think that just giving money to corporations, who a lot of them are playing games and cooking the books anyway, I don't think this is a good idea. Think about that Arrive scam app. It was two guys that did no actual work. They just farmed out the work to somebody else for pennies on the dollar. Are they going to get some of this money, or will companies like them get some of this money? Because no, we don't have a penny to spare in Canada right now. Not an extra penny. If these businesses are viable, buy their product or service and put it somewhere else in the country. You know, I know that we need to support our shipbuilding industry in Canada. Well, British Columbia bought those ferries from China and the Canadian government subsidized it. I think that's complete and total madness. I don't know why we would do that. Not when China's pounding us with tariffs. That's silly. How about to keep those shipbuilders in business, we buy ships that we need as a Canadian society. We need icebreakers for the Arctic. We need ferries for different places, for transit projects. There's no reason to just hand over $10 million to a shipbuilder and get nothing for it. Buy a ship. And if they're a viable business, they'll appreciate being able to make and sell another ship. That's all there is to it. Don't give the money out. Buy the product or service. That is going to instantly help the cream rise to the top and make sure that we are getting good value for our money as taxpayers. Here's more of the Prime Minister.
Now, we recognize that we're only going to realize these opportunities if we act. And, you know, that can be tough in times like this. Changes in the global economy. This isn't just a phase. It's not just a transition. It's a rupture. It's a fundamental change that's happening in a very short period of time. And that rupture brings immense uncertainty. And when you have that big uncertainty, that can paralyze decision-making, hold back investment, stifle growth. But this is not the time to delay and hope for the best. Hope is not a strategy. It's time, as I said earlier, to control what we can control. The products we buy in Canada. Taking the time so our businesses can have what they need to adjust to new realities. Getting capital to our businesses so they can retool and find new markets.
No, absolutely not. We're not retooling anything. We are not giving money to factories to completely overhaul their operation and maybe even pivot to a new business. If it's a viable business, business people will do that. And if it's not a viable business, we just don't need that business. That's all there is to it. Stop just handing out our money here, Mark. It's not your money. It belongs to the taxpayers. And if you don't mind, we're a little strapped. Let me give you another example. Media companies. Oh, the bane of my existence. There are so many mainstream media companies that are going to the government with their hand out. Oh my God, we're going out of business. And they don't bother to look in the mirror and ask, how can we make our television news any better and make more people watch it? They just want a bailout. No bailout. How about instead of bailing them out, but in the name of continuing to have a viable and quote unquote independent media in this country, just buy ads. That's what they sell. Ads. Buy advertising. The government needs to advertise, so just buy it. Don't just give over the money without getting something back in return. Here's some of the Q&A with the Prime Minister. This question is the money question.
Heather Gillis with CBC News. Prime Minister, how do you plan to pay for these support measures? Will it be adding to the deficit or through cutting programs?
The So the measures we're taking, the Strategic Response Fund, liquidity so that businesses can pivot to grow. What I'm talking about principally today, the Regional Tariff Response Initiative, $80 million for Atlantic Canadian small, medium-sized enterprises so they can invest in the future. Those are investments. Those are proud investments. They're ambition investments for the future. And what the government is going to do, what we're in the process for the next budget, is focusing on reducing waste, reducing unnecessary federal spending, reducing the duplication in federal spending, becoming more efficient in federal spending so that we have the room, we have the force to support our businesses so they can invest for the future. That's what we're doing. And a key message from today is we're doing that, and we'll be working with the province of Newfoundland and Labrador on major projects in energy, clean and conventional energy, for example. We're also working with the smallest businesses in Newfoundland and Labrador so that they can all invest for a brighter future.
Well, he didn't answer that question. He didn't. How are you going to pay for it? There's only a couple of different options. You can raise taxes, you can print money and contribute to the deficit and inflation, or we can sell off things and use the money for this funding. What is it, Mark? What are you going to do? Mark Carney's in a tough spot. He inherited a mess from Justin Trudeau. The kitty is almost completely cleaned out. We don't have any money here, so what are we going to do? You print more money, you create more inflation, you create more grief for the middle class. Don't need that. And then that son of a bitch, Tiff Macklem, is going to raise interest rates again because inflation is high. It's a vicious cycle. Are you going to raise taxes? Seriously, Mark? Or this is the other option, cut. During the election campaign, the Liberals, and this puts them in a very difficult position, were highly critical of Pierre Poilievre because he was going to make cuts. I don't see any other option now for the federal Liberals but to make cuts. And that, again, is a bait and switch from what happened during the election. They certainly didn't give much of an indication that there was going to be cuts coming, and yet they're culling the federal civil service. There's some departments that are getting gutted. They never should have been that big in the first place, but this is a real tough time to take somebody out of a job, especially a civil service job that you thought was safe. What are we going to do here, Mark? What are we going to do? You got to cut. What are you going to cut? Is it going to be the dental program? Is it going to be the school lunch program? Is it going to be the $10 a day childcare program? What are you going to cut? Something's got to go, or taxes need to go up. We can't spend all this money without printing more or generating more revenue or cutting expenses. That's basic accounting, and he knows that. I'm wondering what's going through his mind right now. Is he going to do it with a straight face, announce massive cuts to the federal budget after he dared people, after he begged people, don't vote for Pierre Poilievre. He's going to cut everything, and that's just going to completely change our way of life and the programs that you rely on. He's going to cut them. How ironic is it if Carney himself is the one who has to do that?
Hi there, my name is Sarah Smelly. I'm with the Canadian Press. How is the federal government planning to change its climate change policies and targets for 2030 and 2035?
Well, the focus, as we stressed on Friday, and we will be going in more detail in the coming weeks, our focus in this very rapidly changing global economy is on what we call climate competitiveness. So we see becoming low carbon in any industry as being a key driver of competitiveness. So let's take conventional oil and gas, offshore, and for example, offshore oil and gas, Bay du Nord as an example. That's one of the lowest carbon new oil fields, depending on how you develop it, but that's the intention, one of the lowest carbon conventional oil and gas opportunities, conventional energy, but oil and gas opportunities that this country has. So we look at that as a way of being competitive in conventional energy. At the same time, we look at the immense opportunity in hydro, again with Churchill. That doesn't just unlock $225 billion, and you know your numbers, Premier, $225 billion for Newfoundland and Labrador. It creates enormous clean power that's going to be one of the key factors for manufacturing going forward, for artificial intelligence, data centers going forward. It creates a host of new economic opportunities in Newfoundland and Labrador and Quebec across Canada. So that focus on what can we do in order to drive emissions down in a way that makes the country more competitive is crucial. Last point on it, and I can't stress this enough, our home building strategy, Build Canada Homes, and you'll be hearing more of that in the next few days, that's not just about doubling the number of homes we're building in this country by the end of the decade, or within the next decade. It's about creating a new industry that is lower carbon, that's more efficient, that homes themselves are more energy efficient by more than 20-25%. And all of that will get our emissions down and make us more competitive. So that's the focus of the government. The government is focused on results, making companies, businesses, industries more climate competitive. Thank you.
More climate competitive. Climate competitive. What does that mean? Why is he so obsessed? I know why he's obsessed with it. He makes money off of it. His wife's company makes money off of it. Half the Liberal cabinet makes money off of it. That's why they're obsessed with it. But frankly, I don't know how they can look Canadians in the eye and say, you know what? We're just going to make life more expensive for you. We don't need to do it. It's an ideology. We believe this nonsense, and we're just going to do it. I know that there are people who are deeply concerned about climate change. There's no way to deny our climate is changing. We can debate why that is or the role that fossil fuels actually play in that. Sure, we can have that debate. But at the end of the day, there's no denying that until the rest of the world gets on board, no matter what Canada does, it's not going to make a difference. The weather will not change by you paying more here in Canada. That's just all there is to it. And it's crazy to think otherwise. We tried this with the carbon tax, right? If you pay more in tax, we can change the weather. And it didn't happen. It just made us broke. The lesson we should learn from the carbon tax is that climate competitiveness is really just a recipe for bankruptcy. That's all there is to it. There are haves and have-nots in the climate industry. And frankly, the haves are mainly in government or paying off the ones who are. Everybody else, the regular middle-class people, they're going to get railroaded and they're going to pay more. I am deeply concerned about whatever it is Mark Carney is thinking here is a new system. You know, he at one point in this news conference said it's going to be dealt with through the tax code. I don't like that either. He's getting ready to introduce carbon credits for individuals. And that's scary too. Friends, I'll have more tomorrow, and I know because I've heard from a few of you, you said there would be a silent date update. I'm going to give you some silent date updates. I think tomorrow is going to be the day I squeeze those in. So check it out tomorrow. Another brand new episode is coming your way. Every day this week, new episodes. And by the way, I said yesterday, I talked about how I try and be fair. There's no Pierre Poilievre in this one because he didn't do anything yesterday. I don't know if he took a day off or he only had private events, but there was no news conference there from Pierre. So today it's an all prime ministerial episode and certainly a lot to think about. Listen, if we're going to send out taxpayer dollars, I'll end on this. If we're going to send out taxpayer dollars, there needs to be a plan. There needs to be strict conditions on it. And those conditions are you do not lay off a single person and you keep your operation in Canada. And you prove to us why if we give you that money, we're going to get good value back. We're not going to spend $10 million to save a $2 million company that's only ever going to pay $3 million in taxes in its entire lifetime. It makes no sense to do that. No sense at all. The right people need to get the money. Just handing out checks to corporations is wildly irresponsible. If we want to help out businesses, if they're truly viable businesses, we will do that by shopping with them in any industry. Steel and aluminum, you guys suffering right now? Okay. Rather than just give you $1 billion to do whatever you want with, we will create a strategic reserve of steel and aluminum. We'll buy it, we'll store it somewhere in this vast country, and then when we need that steel and aluminum, or maybe we'll just do a down payment for future operations. For when we build a pipeline, we're going to need steel and aluminum for that. Auto manufacturers, that one's coming down the pipe soon. They're going to want massive subsidies to stay here in Canada. How about instead of that, we just buy their cars? Wouldn't that also be the same thing? You know, if we want to save the auto industry, how about this? How about they just, instead of cutting a check to these multinational companies, how about they cut the HST on vehicles down to zero? Then everybody in the middle class would be more likely to be able to afford to buy the car of their choice. The government is still out the money no matter what, whether they write a check or just take the HST off, and we can have a vibrant car buying market in this country. That's the way we need to start looking at these things. That's the only way that taxpayers are going to get good value for the money. Stop the corporate welfare. Just start shopping with those companies. Make it mandatory for all these municipalities that are out there buying fleets of vehicles for their whoever to drive around. You have to buy ones made in Canada. It's very simple. The F-150. Okay. The Honda CR-V. Okay. I don't understand why we're buying vehicles that aren't made in Canada. It's stupid if you ask me. Unless we come to some sort of a deal with America, that makes no sense. I'll leave it at that. Friends, have a great day. I'll catch you right back here in less than 24 hours. Oh.